on my laptop so I can show the gallery view with the screen sharing side by side and control that. And then I'm recording the normal way
Mm.
on my main computer. Trying to. There we go.
I will mute myself soon.
How have you been? How's your winter?
Oh, I've been fine. And
Good.
I was in Manhattan before Christmas, and then I'm going back this Sunday to watch him in Manhattan for, I think, 3 weeks.
That's awesome.
So, I made the mistake of going to city council last night,
Oh,
and I had a very professional prepared statement.
yeah.
And I got up there, and right before the meeting, someone from DTE gave me an update on the 35 streetlights that are out around Huron High School and that have been out for a month. And they said, if all goes well, we'll be able to start the work Wednesday or Thursday of this week. So not, it shouldn't take 2 months. How are we going to electrify the whole city when it takes 2 months to repair a streetlight?
We have to get rid of winter, I guess.
Yeah.
Modern day electricity.
Mhm.
Oh.
Here comes Yale.
Can I unplug the vaporizer? You're not even down there.
Yeah.
You better cut your food when I get cold.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, look at that cute baby.
Yeah, he's been a couple of times now. He's my only grandson. So. It's good to put things in perspective when you look at a young life that's not
Yeah.
even a year old and all of the pollution that they're going to face in their lifetime.
Yeah. Roger, apologies. I had to run. We actually called the ambulance, and we had an incident here with one of my colleagues, and she fainted out and most likely was dehydrated, but I didn't want to risk anything. So
Right.
we sent her to the emergency room.
Yeah, I was on with him earlier, talking with one of his students, and then he got called away for a student's medical emergency. So everything's all copacetic with her. She's all back to normal, or?
No, not yet. They're having her pulses was very low, like 40.
Oh, geez.
Oh.
And this is why I saw her and I said, we said, well, I can go, you guys can take me to the emergency room. I said, no, you're taking the ambulance. And they have the paramedics. They came here, they check blood pressure, they check blood glucose, they check everything.
Yeah.
I think Rita said she might not be able to join tonight.
We'll see if we can get through this meeting in time for everybody to rest up before the State of the Union.
That's my student also. She came along, Roger.
Oh, okay. Good to see her in person. Yeah, she needs to give her name and information to Beth so she can be on the attendance sheet. Kathy, maybe your grandson should too. I don't know.
Ah. I have one question. I can only see two people right now. Is there a way to see all of the
Yeah,
members?
go up to your, if you're on a computer,
Yes.
there's a place where you can click on the, it looks like a grid, make full view.
Oh, okay. I keep doing that where it says show grid video. But let me see. Okay, nope. Now I just have Roger.
Let me stop the share and see if that helps you.
Standard. Yes, now it reverted.
Okay. So one of the things you can do when I'm screen sharing is there's a bar between the people and the screen share.
Okay.
And you can slide that bar to show more people or more of the screen.
So, okay. Thank you.
We got two cuties on the screen here.
He's so happy, his little cooing, and it's awesome.
He loves attention and he loves screens, so he doesn't get to watch television very much. So he's happy.
Adorable.
So last night he went to city council and someone grabbed him immediately and introduced him to everyone in the room.
Not to be outdone.
No.
Still few people coming in, so. Like one more and then my screen's full and we can start the meeting. All right. All right. I think we got enough to get going. Hello, I'm Roger Rayle. I'm chair of CARD and chair of SAR Residents for Safe Water. And I'm into my 30th year as a citizen volunteer watching over the Gelman, Paul, Danaher, 1,4-dioxane contamination. And I'm going to share my screen to bring up the agenda. So we record these meetings. So anything you say will be recorded. We can always edit it out later, or if it's direly important, we can stop and start the recording, although I'd rather not do that. And there, that's my introductory spiel. So next I'm going to turn it over to Beth for approval of the January minutes.
Thank you, Roger. And for anybody that I don't have your email and you'd like to be emailed, you can message me in the chat or get my email another way through somebody, and I'll sign you up for the emails. The minutes, we've been putting those in the agenda, so hopefully everyone's had a chance to review the minutes for January. And I didn't see any changes or comments. Is there anyone right now that has any, or do I have a motion to approve the January minutes?
I so move.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone not in favor? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth.
And you're welcome. And now I'll turn it over to Jack.
Thank you, Beth. And I especially want to thank you for producing our minutes. You do a good job of that. And I know that would be a huge challenge for somebody like me. So I really appreciate your work. Before we dive into the items in the agenda, I want to point out that there's been a couple of exchanges of emails that we'll deal with during the meeting. One was there was a small meeting with the Yale group, and we'll handle discussing that under item 5B. And another item, there was some correspondence about testing methodology from Mike Moran and Dan Bicknell, and I think we should handle that under item 5D. So then diving right into this item or into this agenda, I'm going to call on the representative from EPA and ask if they have an update.
I know that Naria is there. Naria, or do you have your?
Hello, can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. Actually, I have some updates, and I have a presentation to share really quick, but I'd rather go through the slides, so I'll do that if it's okay.
Roger, can you make her a co-host so she can share the screen?
If you rather,
No, we want you to. Oh, there, you did it. Roger, you're going to have to unshare the agenda so that she can take over the screen. Thank you.
Okay.
You should be able to do that now. We can see it.
Perfect. So yeah, my name is Nuria Muniz, and I'm an NPL coordinator in EPA Region 5, and I work for the Superfund Management Division. And so I'll discuss 3 items. One is the site inspection updates. You heard some of that last month. EPA's policy with personal identifiable information. Just this is all very quick. And then we'll also talk about split sampling at Blueberry Lane, which I see that you're going to discuss a little bit later as well. So, you know, before before I move forward, I just want to remind everybody of our process. It's an evaluation process, not a designation process. And, you know, as you know, we started with the preliminary assessment. At each, you know, there's several stages that takes us towards possible listing. And at each stage, we actually have to score the site, run the site, get our data, run the score, and if the site is eligible, we move forward in the process. So just so you know, we're in the site inspection phase. And you know, there can be extra sampling. The main piece is to create a hazard ranking system package. We also call it a doc record. This proposes the site to the NPL, and it opens it up for public comment. And about 6 months later or more, the site becomes final to the NPL. And, you know, there's 90-day window to get litigated for the listing. So just wanted to remind everybody of our process. So we're in the site inspection phase. Wrong side, here we are. So you heard that we're done with the field work. And that was between September 26th and October 8th. And at this stage, we're conducting validation and quality assurance. We just need to make sure that all our results are ready for publication. And, you know, so what we're trying to do is ensure that we only use data of known quality. So it's very important that we take time validating the data. And that's where we are now. But even though we are not able to use that data as we move forward, you know, until they're done, Weston is still drafting the site inspection report, and we should have something to review this spring. And the other thing you heard last month is that we are working with EGLE in Washington County and Michigan DHHS. So as we prepare our results. We're going to share these results with the residents that we sample their well. And so we just want to make sure that we're following state standards and county standards as we communicate with the residents. So that's it for the site inspection. And just want to kind of remind everybody how we at EPA have to work under the Federal Privacy Act. We have specific requirements on how we collect, we use, we disseminate, and we store personal identifiable information. And a typical example is those analytical results that we obtain as part of our investigation. And when you pair that with a resident name or home address, that is PII. And so we are able to share that with a homeowner, and we can also share that with supporting agencies. And with supporting agencies, what I mean is those agencies that have signed a data sharing agreement with us. So they know what rules we can follow, and they have to follow those privacy practices that we follow. And so we're doing data sharing agreements with Washington County and Michigan DHHS and EGLE. And we're also planning to do that with Ann Arbor. And then but the good news, of course, is that the owners can do whatever they want with that data. It's for them to share if they want with the public. We just can't do it as the federal government. And then you heard already that split sampling is going to occur at Blueberry Lane. We, EPA, have offered to split sample with EGLE in Ann Arbor, and we have an OSC that has been assigned for this, and that's Jeff Kimball. Jeff, if you want to take over, he's on-scene coordinator for the removal program.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah, my name's Jeff Kimball. I actually, my office is in Ann Arbor off of Plymouth Road over at the EPA's National Vehicle Emissions Testing Lab. We have offices actually back in the laboratory area of that complex. And the program I work for also is under Superfund, but unlike the program Nuria works under in site assessment and then eventually the remedial house of Superfund, I work in the emergency response program. So on sites like this, I guess you could look at my efforts here as being more the short-term facilitator to get the samples collected. That's why I'm involved out here. The removal program, we have the ability to set up quicker, much more quickly, to get contractors and supplies and tools necessary to get out and collect a sample or two. We are not designed for the long-term full investigation of projects like this. We're kind of the emergency folks to get in and get something done and then step away. But because of that, the short time frame to set up for getting through our contracting efforts and everything else set up to collect these samples, that's what I'm working on right now. It's taken up quite a bit of time. I'm trying to make an effort to be able to be out there next Thursday along with the city and the state to collect EPA's own samples, just to basically provide another set of documentation for that resident. And again, the purpose there is to collect additional data for the 1,4 dioxin levels at that one particular address. And then we can actually, EPA can use that data confidently to answer any questions we're getting. And the agency's already been receiving some questions from the public and from others out there aware of the project. And as Nuria mentioned, I just wanted to reinforce that, the way our program works, we're subject to that Privacy Act. So we can collect the data. We can talk about private data at like what we call a block level, where individuals can't be identified, their addresses can't be identified. But it's because of that Privacy Act, we can't share private, residential, or private citizen of the U.S. information with the general public. We're banned from doing that. And even to share that data with the state and with the city and others, we need to actually sign an agreement with them, basically a data sharing agreement, we call them, where they acknowledge EPA's restrictions on releasing that private citizen data to the public and agree to adhere to it as well. However, any data I collect, all lab reports, copies of our notes from the sampling event, all of that I will provide directly to the resident who's agreed to let us come out there and sample as well. So just, you know, we don't hide it from the people themselves. It's their data. We're collecting data. It's theirs. They can share it if they want to, but we won't. At the federal government, we will not release private individuals' data. So that should fully explain that. And again, my involvement here is really limited to, you know, doing this split data sampling, providing that data to the resident and to Nuria's program, and potentially, if we discuss as a larger group, the state, the resident, and the city, if they'd like us to repeat it in March too, we can talk about that as well. Hopefully, I have everything set up in time to actually do it next week. As we said, it's kind of a short time frame, and there's some contracting issues I have as well, getting all that in place. But that's really what I have to present, Nuria.
Okay.
Okay.
May I interrupt? Mike Moran has a question for you.
Sure.
Actually, rather than a question, it was just a comment. So for those of you who are new to this discussion and to the results that were found in on Blueberry Lane, that's in Ann Arbor Township and not Ann Arbor City. Ann Arbor City also participates in a lot of this. So, and it causes some questions in that. So I just wanted to let you know and just reinforce the fact that it's Ann Arbor Township that's working with you on those split samples and where that it has been found. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Rookie
That's
mistake,
helpful.
Mike. That's, like I said, I'm still getting up to speed with all the folks and everything. So thanks for the clarification.
We appreciate it. So is it that all from the EPA then?
Yes, that's all on our.
And thank you so much for both attending and for presenting that information to us. We appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Moving on, is there anyone here from Debbie Dingell's office?
I am here. Joel is here. I don't see Mrs. Dingell on. I know she was maybe going to try and jump in between State of the Union events, but it doesn't look like she could jump in. But just kind of wanted to Mrs. Dingell met with EPA, I think 2 weeks ago now, and kind of discussed a lot of this that Nuria and Jeff went over, and just kind of wanted to reiterate our thanks to EPA for being willing to kind of adapt and implement some of those requests that the Congresswoman had of them on behalf of the community, and being willing to take on those new responsibilities as they come in, and as the community is looking to kind of give these responsibilities to EPA, and being willing to take those on as Mrs. Dingell requests them. So just reiterating that we're grateful for EPA's continued work on those.
And please convey our appreciation to the Congresswoman for us. Mr. Bicknell, did you have anything to add to the EPA report?
No, I just want to thank Maria and Jeff for helping out. And we do need their help. And ideally, this would become a Superfund site.
Okay. So seeing no hands raised, I'm going to move on to item 4 and turn it over to Dan Hamill.
Forgot to unmute. Going down the bullets, I have no new update on the confidentiality. Again, the information that you have been asking for is still under that confidentiality agreement with the Washtenaw County Circuit Court. So when that changes, I will bring that information to this group. So
as I recall, EGLE made a request under the statutory authority it has for that same information.
Right.
Has the polluter responded to that information?
No, they have not responded to that, and we have not moved forward with that separate request from them. Again, being where we are within the court and what's happening in the court, we have chosen right now to not move forward until we get some clarification of where the whole project's moving forward within the court.
Thank you.
The next bullet is, are there any new updates? Roger, okay, are there any new updates for the current CJ, the third CJ? Bringing people back up to speed is the Court of Appeals stopped the implementation of the fourth amended CJ response activity order, and moved it back toward the site being regulated under using the third consent judgment. And we then initiated some confidential negotiations. They also then, under the court also then identified that the current interveners that were allowed in by the court have to, are no longer part of that intervention, and to get back into that and intervene, they have to submit their complaints to the Washtenaw County Circuit Court through the court process, and then the court will evaluate that. Gelman will have a chance to respond to those complaints, and the court then makes a decision whether they can be back in as an intervener, with the current relationship with EGLE and Gelman as we move forward. EGLE, as soon as that Court of Appeals made that decision, initiated negotiations again, because with Gelman, they're confidential negotiations as they were before when everybody was involved. The biggest reason was the third amended CJ, the criteria, drinking water criteria, went back to the third amended CJ, which is 85 parts per billion. And the GSI criteria is 2,800 parts per billion. Well, as we all know, in 2017, the criteria, drinking water criteria changed. The state of Michigan changed that criteria to 7.2 parts per billion, and then the GSI criteria then changed to 280. So we are working to get those, negotiating with Gelman to get an agreement to reinstate those as part of a consent judgment and other activities in that consent judgment. We again, they are confidential negotiations, and that's where we are right now.
So I understand that the content of the discussions are confidential, but can you give us an idea of how frequently the parties are meeting to have those discussions?
We are meeting, we are exchanging, if you want to say, drafts of the CJ, the worked CJ. We had requested that Gelman submit a draft CJ of what they would like to see as part of a mutually agreed to consent judgment, and we are currently have reviewed that and making comments, and going to be presenting those comments very quickly back to Gelman to continue that negotiation. So how often we meet, specific meetings, we've had 2 or 3 more management meetings with them, 2, I believe, and then there's been exchanges of documents in the review process.
Okay, so I hope that while you're having these discussions, you pay attention to the issues that Scioto Township raised when they rejected the proposed fourth consent judgment.
Yeah, as I stated previously, these negotiations, we haven't gone back, stepped back to a CJ that was first initiated and started discussions back in 2017 prior to intervention, 2016 prior to intervention. The starting point is what was negotiated in the fourth amended CJ, and then also what was implemented and proposed to be implemented in the response activity order. So we understand what has been stated by stakeholders, by the interveners and stakeholders, and I can say that we are pursuing that with those interests in mind.
Okay, we have a couple hands up. Go ahead, Jeff.
I think that it's absurd that a court would allow a standard to be enforced that is lower than the active standard. I think that's could be almost agreed upon. And so I obviously don't know what's going on with our intervening status anymore, but I would certainly hope, I see Mr. Reiser's here, that that's an extraordinarily valid argument for me to be allowed back in.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I just want to clarify specifically for US EPA that what we're dealing with here is a situation where the current consent judgment, if you will, administrative order, as you all would call it in the federal government, is not complying with the state environmental laws. That is, the drinking water criteria is not consistent with, in the consent judgment, with the current drinking water criteria on the state books at 7.2, rather it's 85, and that that the consent judgment that they're operating under is violating state law because it doesn't have a surface water, groundwater surface water interface value that's consistent with the law. So they're operating now underneath an old consent judgment administrative agreement that's not complying with the law, nor is it, of course, doing what it needs to do by stopping the plume from moving and migrating.
Okay, go ahead, Dan Hamill.
Okay, just as one final to remind people that third consent judgment was signed in 2011, so that gives you the time frame of when these other criteria and some of the other conditions under the third, when that was implemented. So that's a long time ago. So like I said, we are currently actively pursuing, negotiating with Gelman to implement the current criteria to get back into a mutually agreeable consent judgment, the current criteria and additional activities to meet the objectives, the Western area objective, non-expansion, and the Eastern area objection, the prohibition zone objective of not allowing contamination to move outside the prohibition zone at concentrations greater than 7.2.
Okay.
Roger had a question, and Dan, your hand's still up. Is that another question?
My question is, since you're having the secret negotiations, are at least the dates and the duration of the negotiations being made public?
I'm not sure I understand. Are we identifying, hey, we're dates when we're meeting? Is that what you're
like you say negotiations are taking place? Do we have any records of when those are and how long they last and who attended?
No, they are not. They are not.
Is that confidential too then?
That's that's the way it's being handled.
That's the normal way of doing things.
Yes. If you remember at the with the negotiations, even under the intervention, I mean, because they're the interveners had their legal teams, you knew when things were happening. But again, right now it's between the Gelman and EGLE, and we don't, under our confidentiality negotiations, we don't make that public.
And you should also note that Mr. Hamill pointed out that a lot of this discussion is going on just through the exchange of emails. So it's not necessarily meeting.
It's not sit down meetings. There are Teams meetings. There are like Zoom here. We use Teams, and so there have been some of those, and there have been sit down. A sit down meeting too. But again, a lot of that is being done back and forth as we review, comment, and discuss the current the draft that is being reviewed and commented on.
Go ahead, Dan.
But it just should be pointed out that has been going on since 2016. Since 2016, the state's been negotiating with Gelman to try to get a Fourth Amendment consent judgment. So even though it was denied as it went to the appellate court, it's still been 6 months, and we still have nothing that's complying with the law nor taking care of the problem, really.
I do want to point out that, you know, you're identifying that since 2016, yes, we have been negotiating with Gelman, with the interveners in that negotiations. And we had come up with a mutually agreeable among the negotiating teams, including the interveners, that was rejected and in September of 2021 by the interveners, the actual entities. So, you know, your statement is a little not exact, and not, you know, yes, so we have been negotiating, but it hasn't been just Gelman and EGLE. The interveners were part of that negotiation starting in 2016.
Okay, let's move on. Do you want to take up the next item on the agenda?
Yeah, yes, Roger, this is the first one. If you could bring up that that document. Basically, you know, as far as updates of remediation update of what's been happening, it's very similar to what I discussed last month. I think I've used this figure. I think we've added, I've added some areas that are highlighted, some text related to the Scioto Township residential well sampling events, you know, of last year, and then some text related to the current Ann Arbor Township sampling at 2433 Blueberry Lane. We have no additional wells that have been installed. The wells here are, you know, the same as last month. They were, again, we've completed what is Roger pointing there is this, those are Sentinel wells. These, all of these wells were installed under the response activity order that was implemented by the court in June 2021. So with the plans are, at least verbally, like I've said, we've been you know, Gelman, we've been told by Gelman that some of the additional locations at I and J, which are in the western area, just above there, they are planning on installing the wells that were identified in the response activity orders there. With respect to the Rose area remediation area, Rose well remediation area, they are planning to install an extraction well, or what I believe that they are going to do is they are going to rework or retool an existing previous injection well, IW2, and make it an extraction well. So if the old response activity order identified that a new extraction well would be installed in that area, or that IW2 will be made into an extraction well, or both. So they are planning initially, we've been told to go ahead and make IW2 into an extraction well. Again, they got the permits and they have the access to do that. They had to get access from the city of Ann Arbor related to the infrastructure and the piping to connect everything up. So that is still being planned. The Park Lake well remediation area, that is not, you know, with the having the appeals court revoke the response activity order there, and the concerns by the stakeholders, Jack, that you were asking about, us talking with Gelman about their, you know, concerns as we move forward in the negotiations. They are not going to implement or install a Park Lake well. In that process, if you remember, it would be to submit an NPDES permit. I believe they've submitted one, but they have asked that it not be reviewed and completed, I believe, and with our Water Resources Division. And so that Park Lake well will not go in, and the discharge to First Sister Lake is, you know, then correspondingly will not be done. The locations in the prohibition zones H, G, and F, they were part of you know, what has been identified since 2005 as a down gradient investigation. They are currently don't have a plan of if you want to say a date, they are still part of what we are negotiating. Because, with a downgrading investigation, we want additional information, but we will be, planning or requiring those to be installed, but I don't have a time frame until, as we work forward in our negotiations. Let's see, anything else? The wells that have been installed, they are being sampled quarterly. Most of them are the new wells are currently being sampled quarterly. The wells, the existing monitoring wells are being sampled as required under the monitoring plans that were agreed to back when the third CJ was implemented in 2011. So there are monitoring plans that they are still following to sample existing monitoring wells. They sample approximately 30 to 60 monitoring wells per month and present that information in laboratory reports to EGLE. And then I put that information on our access database and update other databases. And we will eventually have that information on our interactive GIS web map. So the new wells are also being sampled. Most of them started in October last year, and I believe they have been sampled. They have been sampled again here in January. So I don't have that information in our access database. I just received that data. So that is some of the ongoing activities that are required under the third CJ, but will also be a part of a monitoring plan for all wells. Will be part of any negotiated updated CJ.
So can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, you may.
So because of the community opposition to discharging water into the sister lake, you're just not going to proceed with any ideas about the Park Lake well? You not look for an alternative?
We have not identified an alternative right now.
Okay.
There'll be overall evaluations of what is needed to meet the objectives of the two areas, the western and eastern area, of future objectives and within any CJ that is negotiated and agreed to. So I don't want to say at this time there is not an alternative. We are going to request and move forward requesting the Rosewell remediation and get that started. If you remember in the response activity order, the Park Lake well was more of a temporary extraction well in the sense that it was proposed in there and written in there of doing it for a certain amount of time, and that was also then the portable treatment unit, and then with discharge the first sister lake. But we are not pursuing an alternative to hook up to at this time, but that will always be a possibility as we evaluate the data from the site as it relates to the objectives required under an ECJ.
Okay, thank you.
The next update is the Washtenaw County Health Department. We have Roger, are you trying? Yeah, there you go. This is this data, and I did talk about this last month. This is what was sampled in 2022. These locations, Lakeview, Avenue, up on the Rose, up Rose Avenue up there, and then in that area, there was 185 wells were sampled, and along Jackson, where he's pointing at now, 185 wells were sampled. There were 6 detections. One new detection on Elizabeth related to the new lower reporting level. The concentrations range from 0.9 to 2.4 parts per billion. So this was I will be posting this information Here I got the sometime in the near future on the webpage, there will be an Excel file. Well, it'll be a PDF, but it'll represent an Excel file with that data related to addresses, as I've done in the years past. This next figure is, I just wanted to show what the current long-term monitoring areas are prior to next year. This is where we have been monitoring this long-term monitoring. A lot of these locations were every 2 years. And for example, we down south there, we did not do, that's Liberty Road area. We did not do that this year. It will be included as, I believe, part of next year. In addition to that, and I will get an updated map here soon for this year, is we, based upon the information and what has happened out in Scioto Township with the low-level concentrations, we have added monitoring wells, and Jenny and I reviewed and discussed and came up with a list of monitoring wells that includes going back to some of the locations in Scioto Township and confirming some of the data that was collected in 2020 and 2021. So this year we're gonna, right now we're gonna be sampling we're gonna be sampling 244 residential wells. Last year was 185. So most of those locations, are going to be the new wells out there in Scioto. We are not going to be sampling every well that was sampled by Scioto Township. There was we've come up with a list to check certain locations and just confirm to see what is the current site, current concentrations in the areas of Scioto Township. That sampling will begin. Washtenaw County does collect the samples for EGLE. We contract them to do that. That sampling will begin in April or May. It depends on when they will start that, but it has historically started in April, May timeframe. And then it is completed prior to the end of September 30th, prior to the end of the fiscal year. So there'll be several sampling events starting in April, May, and over the summer to collect all the 244 samples, proposed sampling locations. So there was a question about the clarification. Those samples will be analyzed by sent to the EGLE laboratory, and will be analyzed as it stands now by the method that we currently use, the 8260 SIM method, with a reporting limit of 0.5 parts per billion.
I see no hands. You can feel free to move on.
The update, the next item is the update of the MS4 violation.
Can I interrupt? Sorry.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Before we go on, thank you very much. This is amazing information in here. Question number one, the water that you guys sampled, do you test for anything else besides TCE? Besides dioxane?
No, not in, well, we have in the past historically done some testing of for full scan volatiles and some semi-vols. We do not, we did that several years ago, probably it's approaching 4 or 5 years. But we, under this long-term program, the contaminant of concern, a long-term sampling at Gelman, the contaminant of concern is dioxane. So that's what we analyze for.
Okay, did you ever look at any of the PFAS?
That there is sampling going on with PFAS, but not in relationship to what the Gelman site in the sense. The EGLE is conducting PFAS sampling across the state, including in Washtenaw County. That is a different group, a different program. That information is available under that. We have what is called MPART, and that's an acronym that I'm not going to be able to remember.
No, that's okay.
But they do have a web page with information on PFAS in the state of Michigan. So I can, I don't have that off the top of my head here, but I can provide that to Roger after, within a day or so, make sure I get the right link so you can look at some information that is collected by the state of Michigan. It's an ongoing program. It's again a group within the state that is concentrating specifically on PFAS.
Okay, and I have a second question also.
Sure.
Now, was the Gelman producing? How did the spill? Educate me a little bit more. Was there any other coconut, for example, in most of all over the world, wherever you find dioxane, you find also what we call the co-contaminants, and this is DCA, trichloroethylene, trichloroethylene, and so on. Do you have any suspicion that you might have some of these two?
That's why we did some sampling some years ago, because of some questions that brought up by stakeholders like the group here on what potentially Gelman was utilizing also during the time when the site was contaminated. Gelman specifically used the 1,4-dioxane in their production of medical filters as
Right.
So their information and what they presented to us as far as what inventory of chemicals that they had on site, those types of things, they identified that they did not have these other co-contaminants as part of their process. We did some sampling just at selected locations, including on the property, where likely locations, if they were on site, then they would show up in these locations where the contamination was first introduced to the environment. And we did not get a positive information back that there was co-contaminants as part of the contaminants of concern at Gelman.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Roger.
Dr. Vasilou, can you just, you don't have a name on your screen there. So I just thought I would tell people you're from Yale University.
Let me rename myself. Yes.
Yeah. So so people know who you are and why you're here. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks. That's all. We need to bring you up to date on the early data at the Gelman site and why dioxane is the major contaminant. But there were other things found. And when the EPA came in to do their preliminary analysis around the time that PFAS was a hot topic, so they asked Gelman to look through their records to see if there was any PFAS usage, and the answer came back, not to any great degree. We don't have any data relating to what that means, given that PFAS is 1,000 times more dangerous than dioxane. I'd like to know, was there 850 pounds of PFAS over 20 years, like there was 850,000 pounds of dioxane over 20 years? Because that would be on the same par of risk. I just wanted to point that out to everybody. We'd like to have that original PFAS evaluation data sometime.
This is rather important, and I'll tell you why. What I was asking you before, and I will give you just a very brief update. What we find in the animal studies is that the 1,4-dioxane is a dimorphic agent in terms of promoting carcinogenesis and also contribute to carcinogenesis, to cancer. So what we found is that 1,4-dioxane can upregulate one enzyme called cytochrome P452E1, which this enzyme can activate pro-carcinogens to carcinogens. And this is why I was asking you before, especially trichloroethylene. I mean, in the plastic area, we can check and survey a little bit, but I don't know about TC, but it's hard to believe that making medical devices that PFAS have not been used in there. But, again, we will be looking for that together, and then we will explain what are later on, if we have time, what we're gonna be working with you guys.
Okay. The next item is the update on the MS4 violation. Again, is if you just bringing everybody up to speed again, the MS4 violation is related to the Allen Creek drain area in the eastern area of the Gelman site. It is dioxane has been detected in our sampling of that drain in that area. And so the Allen Creek drain is an MS4 sewer system for, in the state of Michigan. So it's also regulated under the MS4 program, which our Water Resources Division regulates for the EPA. It's a federal program, but the EPA gives jurisdiction or regulation to the states. And so our Water Resources Division is regulating that with the permit holder. The permit holder is Washtenaw County Water Resources Commission, because it's a Washtenaw County storm sewer, and so they hold the permit, and they are required to eliminate illicit discharge, which concentrations of any contaminant is an illicit discharge into the sewer. So they have Evan Pratt has our water resources division people have been working with Evan Pratt, and we'll be working with Gelman. Basically, our water resources division has offered and to work directly with Gelman, even though Evan and Washington County, as a Washington County Water Resources Commissioner, is the permit holder. They're going to work directly with Gelman on the elimination of the illicit discharge, basically 1,4-dioxane getting into the storm sewer, contaminated groundwater. The source would be contaminated groundwater venting into that sewer. So the plan they have will be basically setting up a meeting, requesting a meeting from Gelman here very soon, is what I've been told, to sit down and identify what the options are that Gelman has to under the program to eliminate that discharge, the requirements and potential options to eliminate that discharge. So that is, like I said, being handled by our Water Resources Division, and we work closely with them, giving them any information we gather related to the current contamination and the sampling that we do. And once they get started with any meetings with Gelman, I'll get some information and present that to this group. The next item in F there is
Hey, Dan Hamill, can I just make a comment about?
okay. I didn't see the
okay,
hand.
that's
Sorry.
fine, thanks. So I just want to remind people that we found up to 49 part per billion in recent years in the Allen's Creek drain in West Park. Dr. Robert Bailey has published an article in Dr. Vasilou's journal, that peer-reviewed journal article that showed that 150 part per billion, near someone's basement, where water could get into the basement that's contaminated, evaporate, and expose the homeowner. 150 part per billion would be a concern, and could be a dangerous situation for the homeowners or business, if it's a business. And I think, yeah, it's unfortunate that we're using the Allen's Creek drain as a conduit to the Huron River at relatively high concentrations, I would say, and maybe contaminating groundwater farther downstream with the other openings in the creek pipe could be a concern. And I think this has been really lagging for a long time and should have been dealt with long ago. I think there were some contentions about whether it's really meaningful or not, and I would say it's definitely meaningful. Thank you.
I just have to tell you, if I may interrupt a little bit. When I came here in Connecticut, it was before the era of the PFAS, and I met with the state agencies, and I said, what is your major concern, environmental concern for the state? And they told me it was 1.4 dioxane, and the major reason that they were telling me that is because they couldn't filter it. You know, they couldn't get rid of it. And this is, as you know, you really require expensive equipment to get rid of it. And this is another area that we can discuss, and I can have one of my members of the engineers that works on the program. We're trying to scale down the advanced oxidation in order that can be used in houses, but then we'll talk a little bit more when the Yale, the 5B will be in touch, I mean, in order.
Okay. The next item that I have some information on is F. It's a GSI work plan for Allen Drain System. If bringing people back up to speed is that again, our Water Resources Division handles the MS4 violation into a storm sewer, but my division handles what is identified as groundwater surface water interface. Basically venting of contaminated groundwater to surface water bodies, including sewers. So when they are a surface water body, the surface waters of the state of Michigan. So as part of that, in both the western and eastern area, there is shallow groundwater contamination near surface waters. And so we have required that Gelman, as part of that negotiations, the previous negotiations on the consent judgment, there was a requirement to conduct basically GSI investigations in both the western area and eastern area. Gelman has submitted work plans for the western area. We've made comments, and they have initiated some early sampling to move along, to move forward in the investigation in the western area. Western area being the area west of Wagner Road. And then they've also submitted a work plan, GSI work plan in the eastern area, in the area of the Allen Creek Drain. We've made comment. They submitted that last fall. We made comments and gave them comments in November, end of November, and we have not heard. Requesting that they take our comments and submit a revised work plan. We have not received a revised work plan and have not heard, not discussed with that since then. But we will be reaching out here in February before the next CARD meeting to determine the status and the what is required for Gelman to provide us with a work plan, the final work plan for the eastern area GSI investigation. So that's where we are currently. The next one is G, is the Water Resources Division, basically the NPDES renewal process of the existing permit that's utilized to discharge treated groundwater to the unnamed tributary of Honey Creek from their treatment system at their Wagner Road facility. I do not have any updates other than they have moved to the next step internally. But I want to manage expectations. I don't have any specific updates, timeframes, and as soon as I get any information, they are aware. I ask every month, and they are aware that you guys have concerns, and that as soon as I get any information, I'll bring it to this group. If you remember, part of that process under the NPDES is they will, once they're done with their internal review, they will review that with Gelman. And after that is done, they will then make that available in a public comment period. Their proposed NPDES permit limits and, for discharge. So you will have an opportunity to review and make comments on the renewal of that permit.
Okay. Do you have anything?
I have what I think is going to be, what's new is about the Ann Arbor, the sampling at 2433 Blueberry Lane. So I'll let, we'll wait and give any information or answer any questions that you may have of EGLE during Mike's presentation in 5D.
Alrighty. I didn't notice this. Patty here?
No, and no update, or she would have emailed me, she said.
Alrighty. So then let's move on to the Yale Superfund Research Program. Vassilis? Oop.
I'm sorry, I want to get an update of what's going on with my colleague who is in the emergency room, my other two members of the lab. Anyway, my name is Vassilis Vassiliou. Again, if some of you have not met with me yet, I am the director of the Yale Superfund Research Center, which is focused exclusively on 1.4 dioxane and actually its co-contaminants. The reason that I'm telling you that its co-contaminants is throughout the world, even in Germany, all the sites, the Superfund sites that they found 1.4 dioxane, they found it together with TCE, DCA, or these chlorinated solvents. And the reason for that is, dioxane was used as also as a stabilizer of all these chemicals. So wherever there is this chemical, there is also dioxane. And the synergism between these chemicals is, in my opinion, is a killer, because what we're finding is 1.4 dioxane biochemically, it can activate, as I told you, procarcinogens to carcinogens. It can be involved in the vinyl chloride metabolism. It can be involved in trichloroethylene activation and so on. So we have one program on very quick on the mechanisms. We're using mouse studies and doing extensively big experiments using transgenic mice and so on. The second project, as you all know, there is not a clear there is an epidemiological study regarding the effects of 1.4 dioxane. There might be results that they might come from your state that we don't even know, we don't even expect. Possible ways of toxicity, we heard is, first target could be the liver, the second could be the kidneys, and it could be some other tumors. We don't even know because, 1.4 dioxane has not been evaluated in Superfund sites. So any epidemiological studies that have been done, nothing has been known about it. Okay, and now we're seeing it not only in Michigan. I will provide you the stories of the New Jersey, the water facilities. They discovered there was 1.4 dioxane in the drinking water because the water was coming from the river and the river was contaminated. So the second study that we have is we're trying to do not full epidemiological study, but an exposure, because we don't have enough money for that. But we're trying to do an exposure assessment study in the area of Long Island, because Long Island uses well water, which has levels really much higher of what we have here, 0.36 parts per billion. Okay, and nothing compared to what you've seen in Michigan. So the third project is we're trying to find ways to identify, to detect 1.4 dioxane with online devices. So in other words, if we have some water, surface water, we can have a device in there and it can tell us if that water, instead of taking the sampling, going to the lab, a week later, you find out. We're trying to develop a methodology that could detect these chemicals, especially the 1.4 dioxane, right there, and then it can report it. So for example, EGLE can really monitor the areas of contaminations throughout the state on surface water, groundwater, and so on. The fourth and most important part of that is the development of affordable remediation devices based on advanced oxidation. And my colleague Jai Hong King, so I have, my partners are from from Yale Chemical and Environmental Engineering, and they are working towards this process. So what we're trying to do, instead of having these big, expensive things that you're trying to do them all the filtering, that you have a device that you can have it at home and you can have that. So what I want to tell you is, I have contacted with my program officer and I told them about your case. And I really appreciate that you open your hands and you accepted us in here. The reason that what I'm looking for you to work with you, there are two things. One is we can probably ask next year for up to $1 million on federal funds to do an extended exposure assessment in your area. In other words, we can see if we can determine the water on the wells, and also we can take some blood from the people that they're there with all the restrictions and everything. And then we can figure out if there is an association between what is found in the well water, on the water of the environment, or, you know, their basement as, you know, inhalation process, and then measure it also in the blood. But also in the blood, we measure if there are any changes, any changes into their metabolic system, and that you can predispose you or indicate that you're going to get a disease. The other thing is that we can do, and this is what we can work with you, if you tell us, we can develop another grant proposal, which is called Research to Action. And this is essentially, if you tell us what you want from Yale to do, from my group, my team, I can put a team together, and you tell me, you know what, we want a better mapping of the area, or we want to find out, you know, but this has to do, this type of proposal, it has to be a direct interaction with the community. So community engagement, we have a community engagement here, but not as big as the one that we're going to propose with you. So you want to tell us, this is what we want. You have to direct our research, and this is what we call research to action. So you're going to tell us what your needs are as residents, and then we're going to try to really trying to address that. And we can put a proposal that can give us up to about $500,000 direct, $500,000 direct cost per year for 5 years. And this is what I had asked Rogers to send me a memo that we want to already document, that we're participating, we're working with you. So we have asked if you can give us a few ideas of what would you like us to do. Do I cover everything?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to ask Dr. Lacruso to describe the meeting that the executive board of CARD had with the Yale group, if I can impose on her to do that.
Okay, but except I was just looking for that memo and I couldn't find it.
Oh,
fast as you were talking. So the board members, several of the board members and myself met, and we talked about and identified what our key interests were, concerns were with the Skelman contamination, and what we would hope to see coming from our interaction with Yale, and what kind of outcomes we'd hope to have. Have you found that? Anybody? Jack, were you able to find it faster?
I haven't, yeah.
Maybe you could put it even up. Could you share screen it? And we could just go to the bullet list, you know, and then that would help people to see what we're talking about. And
Roger has to remove the agenda and enable me to share my screen. Righty, let's see.
So while he's doing that, let me just say that this is a real opportunity we have, because the Dr. Vassalou Center is a Superfund Research Program Center, and we have people from the EPA here, and the EPA is very interested in seeing these kinds of collaborations, and it's an opportunity for us to get resources in. So if we move down to the bullets, so here are some specific ideas that we came up with in our discussion and communicated to Dr. Vassalou that we'd like to see improved delineation, definition of the current state of the contamination in multiple dimensions, not just area, but also depth, and using sensitive analytical methods. And the second was improved definition of potential residential exposures where private wells are the principal source of drinking water. Those are overlap, but they're not the same. The third is the health effects, which Dr. Vassalou mentioned as a possibility for, I think he said, a supplement grant. That's something, of course, that I've always been very interested in, that why don't we even have a registry of people who are exposed in this state? So that was a high. The fourth was assistance participating in organizing community events where outreach, where we educate the public. That always is a big effort, so any assistance there would be helpful. The fifth is data collection and modeling. It's a big effort to do this data collection, do the mapping, and we don't really have a modeler in our group. And so we're interested, for example, in modeling some of these exposures and health risks from the contaminated groundwater, and the basements is an example of that. It's really not been, it could be modeled much more sophisticated than what we've done. We've done the basics, we've done the beginning. Then I do believe that Dr. Vassalou mentioned that they're working on technologies that might be able to operate as a sensor, as well as for cleaning up the water. And so that's really something we think our community would be very interested in. The people who have these wells that are at risk for being contaminated. A lot of times, these people are drinking this water and they don't even know it's contaminated until and unless the township, for example, in the last couple of years says, hey, can I test your well water? Oops, you're drinking dioxane. So, and we'd also like to have improved understanding of exposure health risks and central organization of data in accessible databases. That's what we came up with. And if you scroll down, I think we had outcomes. And, honestly, for those of you who don't do centers, they are sort of different. They're actions versus outcomes. They do these charts when you get these centers, you apply for these centers to the NIH. And so these were the three outcomes. They're related, but they're just tangibles that we would hope to see. And I guess do people want me to read this, or should I? I'll try to read it quickly. Homeowner access to information on private well contamination in an ongoing and timely manner. Homeowner access to solutions for removing and reducing 1,4-dioxane concentration in their well water, and an improved understanding of residential health risks, both from past exposures, because some of the past exposures were horrendously high. But fast exposures as well as current exposures. And if you're talking about some of these delayed onset diseases, as for an example, some neurological diseases, autoimmune diseases, or cancer, you're going to be talking about what happened decades ago. So we'd like to have that as an outcome. So that's what we came up with. So if people have additions, I think we'd be happy to hear about it. And Dr. Vassalou would be happy to hear about it. Thank you, Jack, for finding that.
Yes, I brought it up at the beginning of the meeting in hopes that you go looking for it, but that's
I don't think I was on yet. I was a little slow getting on.
I can circulate that memo if anybody is interested in seeing it. So where are we now? The intervener update. So the interveners were basically dismissed from the case, and the only way they can get back in is if they file initial suits to become involved in it. And I would note that the January 23rd City Council meeting, Council went into closed session to discuss Attorney General versus Gelman. And they were in closed session for about 35 minutes. I have no idea what they talked about, but I don't know if they're contemplating filing an original action against the polluter, or if they have some other strategy to work with the Attorney General on that case. But for all practical purposes, the Court of Appeals put an end to that particular litigation, and we're back to having EGLE negotiate a consent judgment or having the interveners initiate new litigation. I'm kind of curious as to what happened in that closed session, because I don't think there is any pending litigation unless they've drafted a complaint to bring against Gelman, because the Attorney General case is excluding those previous interveners. And so I'm not sure that that was a properly called closed session, but that's a separate matter entirely. Having said that, Kathy, do you have anything to add to the intervener update?
Yes, I've got a little bit I could add. There will be a status conference in front of Judge Connors in chambers on this Thursday, February 9th, for all of the interveners, EGLE and Gelman. It's expected that Judge Connors will set a schedule of some sort. Possibly there will be provisions for additional settlement negotiations. We don't know. Also, Washtenaw County has filed their complaint. I don't know if anyone mentioned this earlier. It was filed yesterday in Circuit Court.
Do you have a copy of that complaint?
I do. I just got it. I haven't read it. I can forward it to you.
Thank you. Okay, well, that gives me knowledge I didn't have before I questioned the propriety of the closed session. Maybe all the interveners are going to file suit. Any questions on the intervener status? Go ahead, Kathy.
I don't have anything more to add.
I meant the other Kathy.
Oh, okay.
I just have a question. So this hearing on Thursday, is it open to the public?
No, it's not. I clarified that with Bill Stapleton this afternoon. It is in chambers. It's closed to the public.
Oh, okay. Would that mean that an attorney from the city of Ann Arbor might be present?
Definitely.
Pardon me?
Yes, I would. I'm going to assume that an attorney from the city of Ann Arbor will be present.
Okay.
Oh, what would give that attorney the ability to be present if there wasn't an official intervener from the city of Ann Arbor that they were representing?
Well,
you don't have to answer that. I'm just.
Yeah, I might have misinformed you. The Court of Appeals did deal us a deadly blow, but I think remanded it to the trial court to tidy it up, and that's what this would be. It's likely that absent new complaints, which apparently the county has filed, that we would be dismissed. But this is interesting. I look forward to this. Do you know if it'll be just attorneys attending that conference, or will parties be in the room as well?
to my knowledge, it's just attorneys.
Okay. Thank you. Kathy Griswold, you still have your hand up.
Yes, I guess I'm still somewhat puzzled, and I remember the conversation that I had with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell about how the attorneys should not be allowed to meet without the interveners because they were representing us. So now we have a case once again where the interveners are not present, but their attorneys are present. And I attended that appeals court hearing, and I thought we lost our status as interveners unless we filed again. So again, I don't understand how attorneys for interveners could be present and continuing to bill for their services.
Give me a ring and I'll explain it to you. But most likely the closed session was called so that the city's attorney could discuss how to go forward when they went in front of this judge. Let's move on to the next item, which is
well, let me jump in here. And I wrote this in the comments, just an observation. And that is, if interveners do move forward, I do hope that the intervening attorneys do a better job of communicating with the interveners. And whereas as much as possible, have the interveners attend sessions. So there's crystal clear communication. That has not happened. And I look at what the fourth court order came up with and how unsatisfactory it was to just about all the intervening parties. We need to do a better job. This can't happen again absent US EPA intervention. Even if a federal process goes forward and this type of circumstance happens, intervening attorneys need to communicate and probably have a better transparent process with their clients. And that just doesn't happen. And I'm just frustrated after 4 years of this. Amount of $1 million spent, we came up with what we had. My 2 cents.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to the next item. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Moran to talk about well testing. Oh, there's a hand. Go ahead, Vince.
Yeah, I just would like to remind everybody, Mike Moran brought this up a couple of years ago, that we shouldn't really be calling this a court case that the interveners are involved in. We're really not involved in it. It's a lot of behind the door discussions. So it's really not a consent judgment. You know, we should be calling it a court case or a court judgment. So just to let people know that there's a lot of concern amongst the public and the interveners that we're not being represented, and it's pretty clear that we are not. So thanks.
Okay. Mike, if you'd like to take over.
Yes, previously I'd reported on a test in Ann Arbor Township. So just to go back, in 2020, Ann Arbor Township did some testing of homeowner wells in a couple of locations looking for PFAS and 1,4-dioxane, and we got no detections at that time. This year, then, we did a second round of testing and got a report in October of 2022 of dioxane at a Blueberry Lane house at 9.1. Which, as everyone knows, is over the state dioxane drinking water criterion. That was a test that there was not a split sample. It was simply a test being done by Ann Arbor Township of a number of residences in areas where we expected, if there were dioxane present, we might find it in Ann Arbor Township for both PFAS and dioxane. We got no detections of PFAS on those tests. The following month, we did a test to confirm or to evaluate where we are with the residents that had reported 9.1. And my memory is that we took a sample within some hours of EGLE taking a sample. And we found 1.9 parts per billion at that time. EGLE reported non-detect. As a result, we worked with EGLE to work out a plan to do some split sampling for at least 3 months. The January test has come back, and it came back non-detect, both by us and by EGLE. Ann Arbor Township using method 522 and EGLE using 5267. So since that period of time, we've been again working with EGLE, and now with EPA, who wants to join the split sample. So in February, we expect to have a 3-way split sample, and at February 16th, which is coming up very quickly, as EPA had reported earlier this evening. They're working to get caught up so that they can also participate in that split sample to be taken again in February 16th. Again, Ann Arbor Township will be testing with method 522 and EGLE with 8260 SEM. We've continued our discussion with EGLE about the validity of using, or the wisdom of using 8260 SEM when 522 is a much, in our mind, better and more sensitive test, both with a couple of interests in mind. One being to detect as best as humanly possible the limits of the existing plume, and also to be able to report very low levels, if there are very low levels of 1,4-dioxane, so that our residents can make some informed decisions about whether or not to continue to drink water in their well, even if it's under, certainly under 85 parts per billion, but even if it's under 7.2, or for that matter, under 3. I had requested that Dan provide us, I think before the last meeting I reported that I had requested that Dan provide us with any certifications of their lab and any proficiency tests to show that they could meet the limits that they have been claiming for 8260 SEM, which is a reporting level of 0.5. And again, you heard tonight that Dan was reporting some previous test results, not with Ann Arbor Township, I don't think, but contending that their doctored 8260 SEM is able to detect down to 0.5. What we got back in response, so Dan passed that up and down the chain, and what we were sent was a letter from Kirby Shane, director of the laboratory services at EGLE, and it's dated January 13th, 2023. I have it also attached a proficiency test that had been run, I believe, on January the 9th by a lab called ERA. I'm a little confused. I continue to be confused about what it is that EGLE is claiming, because this report from Kirby Shane says that EGLE's lab has made improvements to its procedure, that's 8260, to increase the sensitivity of the method, resulting in a lower reporting limit, RL, at 0.5 UG over L, and a method detection limit of MDL of 0.10 UG over L for 1,4-dioxane. It goes on to say, the laboratory does not make claims regarding these limits and produces analytical data as part of the process of validating and implementing reliable reporting limits. I'm confused because, again, tonight, Dan again used the claim that you have a reporting level of 0.5. So while the lab says it's making no claims for it, and it's the EGLE lab, EGLE seems to be making the claims, at least to us and to our residents. The other thing that was attached was the only proficiency test that I got. For those who are maybe unfamiliar with it, there are places, including EPA for that matter, that will test the proficiency of a lab's ability to test to its claim limits by sending them a sample with an unknown amount of, in this case, 1,4-dioxane in it, and then taking the sample back from that entity, here EGLE, and reporting back what they found and what was reported. That proficiency test adds absolutely nothing to the discussion that we've been having, because what happened was ERA sent them a blank with unknown 2.79, I believe was the amount. I don't have it right in front of me, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And EGLE did detect 1,4-dioxane and reported at 3.21. They also report the standard deviation or the deviation, acceptable deviations in that. And basically what it shows is what they reported at 321, which ERA said was 2.79, equates to them being able to test to 3 points per billion, which is what I continue to find in the literature is the limits of 8260 sim. So I remain completely perplexed at how EGLE can continue to claim without any authority, at least that's been provided to us, that they can test down to 0.5. So we do hope that we can continue this discussion, that they will maybe we can find someone who will send them a blank with an amount that's so low as to be able to equate with 0.65. Obviously, I mean 0.5. Obviously, the purpose of giving them an unknown blank is so they can report it and they can show it shows their proficiency, their competence or not. Unfortunately, what they provided helps us not at all with the decision as to whether they can test down to 0.5. So I hope we can resolve this, as I said, for the reasons that we want to know to the best of our ability, the limits of the plume as it exists today, and be able to report to our residents what is in their water. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is really a question of reliability. If for using a particular test, we want to know whether the results that are reported are reliable.
Can I?
I like to make a comment before you, while it's, from Mike. Mike, what, you read some of the text of that letter. Again, I'm not a lab person, but what it, when the laboratory identified it does not make claims regarding these limits and produces analytic, what it was saying is they're just not making claims. They produce the results with a QC backup to show that they are meeting 0.5 parts per billion reporting limit. Now, reporting limit is above a detection limit. What they were indicating with a 0.1 is they were detecting down to 0.1, but you don't. With the method, there is a procedure of presenting the data to a reliable, a concentration that is reliable. So the reporting limit is 0.5. That you misunderstood when they said they don't make claims. What they were saying is they don't just make claims of saying we can do that. Their analysis, with what is produced in the QA/QC packages of the actual analysis, produces the analytical data required to show that and validate that the concentrations that they are meeting is down to 0.5. If there's a concentration at 0.5 or above, they will detect it. So
Dan,
you kind of took that. I think it was a bad choice of a little misleading or bad choice maybe of when they said they don't make claims. They don't make claims where they're verbally saying we can do this without proving it. So that's what that part of it is on that one. So just, we're going to be putting together some other responding to some of the other questions with your latest email. And but I did want to point that out. And then as far as the what they get for the proficiency testing, this is what is typically done. This is what is done. They are sent a sample with an unknown amount. They analyze it and they come up with an amount, and it has to meet within brackets, that standard deviation brackets that identifies that the lab is proficient at the analysis method that they are utilizing. You're right. I mean, it didn't have a sample down at 0.5 or just above that. That was an unknown. So that is part of that. You just don't, you don't ask, you don't get, they're not necessarily going to get a low level for a proficiency, for a low level concentration in a proficiency sample. That proficiency test identified that they met the QA/QC brackets, for lack of a better description, for the analysis of using 8260 sim. what they're identifying in their lab reports is their lab reports are identifying that they can and do hit that 0.5 part per billion reporting limit. So I just wanted to make sure people understood that. I understand there's some confusion, and we'll work with you in the future about, try to alleviate that confusion, and I'll bring back other information to this group.
So
I hope that they'll be more specific than they were with their language, if that's in fact the case, because that is ambiguous at best.
Well,
and you're not the one who wrote it, so please let me finish.
Oh,
so
sorry.
that's what I have to take the common meaning of the words, and that's what I have done. So if you have more, I'd be glad to see it. And in fact, let me just say that it was interesting too, when I asked for all proficiency tests, that my letter was dated the same day essentially as the sample was received by this and tested by ERA. So it seems to me, looking at it, unless it's just an amazing coincidence, that there had not been any request previously to my asking you if your proficiency has been proven. If you have them, please give them to me, because this is all I have.
Well, like I said, there also be a new proficiency in 2023 here, or in the first quarter, early 2023, that they're going to be doing. So we'll provide that, and I'll go back and we'll see what other information. Again, the proficiency, if any past proficiency tests. So.
Well, let me just say again that if you are going to be asking this lab, because most of the reading that I have done, in fact, all of it, with the exception of the quote unquote claims or not claims or whatever that EGLE makes, reports that the system that you use, 8260 SEM, is accurate to about 3 parts per billion. And in fact, I thought I had heard from you previously that you had read some of the same things. That being the case, when you're testing at 8620, do you tell this lab that's going to be doing your proficiency score that you claim or assert, or whatever word you want to use, that you can test accurately to 0.5 or 0.1?
The proficiency test is the sample that's given to the lab for us to test, the EGLE lab to test. So, and then they provide the lab report, and that lab report is then reviewed and commented on by the group, the ERA. So you're kind of, we're not talking apples to apples. I mean, there was no claim that by the lab prior to that, they don't get that. They have to take a sample unknown and do the testing and provide the backup QA/QC to identify that for the specific method used, that they are proficient. Now, your definition of proficient, okay, are you proficient down to 0.5? Well, again, they did not receive a sample at 0.5. So it is a little confusing. I understand where the confusion is. And if you look at even the EPA, you're saying that it's only accurate to 3. Well, if you even look at the EPA web page, depending on the procedure, how you the procedure, its accuracy, it ranges from 0.5 to the 3, that way. So you can reach the lower detections as long as you do the testing, the QA/QC work, and repetitions of the analysis using the method, and get a lower reporting limit and detection limit / reporting limit, both of those. So,
if I may, we're burning up a ton of time.
Okay. Yeah, I just rest my case here, Jack.
Yeah, but what we would really like is for you to provide some verification that your test can actually detect down to the levels that you claim. I understand what you're saying about the results that you gave to Mike, but that's not what we asked for. What we're asking for is some evidence that the test is as sensitive as you say.
Okay.
I've got a couple hands up. I'm going to try to get through those because we're running really late. Go ahead, Dr. Vasilis.
Well, very quick question, because I was a little bit surprised and puzzled actually for detection, not detection within a limited amount of, not really that big of a time in between the interval. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is 1.4 dioxane, you start splitting it and everything, you have a lot of space in the test tube, you might have some evaporation, which means that they might escape from the water. And that might create some results. So it's better to have it on, on cold temperatures and, do the assays. And you always, in addition to QC, now with all the methodologies, you also run a dose response, a curve, a concentration curve to evaluate your data. But it's a little bit of concern, and I would really like to know what was the sampling process and how they were split. I mean, that might explain some of the controversies that might be seen.
Thank you. Go ahead, Roger.
I just want to point out that how can the state as a regulator expect the company to do the best cleanup when the state can't use the best analysis method that's out there? We're asking, that's setting a bad precedent for cleanups. Don't we want the best cleanup? Shouldn't we have the best analysis method? That's all.
Good point. If everybody put their hands down, I'm going to move on just because we're running out of time. Kathy Knoll, do you have anything to report about the KOC property?
There are no updates. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a resolution that was attached to the agenda in a fashion that was timely enough that we can take a vote on it. We've discussed this in previous meetings. Is there any opposition to just moving right straight to a vote on approving this? Okay.
It's been approved, Jack. We just need to send it to whoever elected officials we want to.
Okay.
It's still being worked on.
All right. So it's been approved, and we've approved the idea of sending it. We just haven't decided who to send it to. Okay.
Right.
We can work that out in the executive.
James helped me, and then
Okay.
okay, we'll get together and finalize that.
The bylaws state that the chair can assign a task like that to the executive director. So Jack, go ahead and send it.
Moving right along.
Thank you.
He didn't raise his hand. I'm not going to recognize that comment. Okay, Roger, you've got about 17 minutes. You're mute. Roger, you're mute.
Still muted, Roger.
Things at once. All right, so we have the data in EGLE's database through 2022, and I've extracted the data and wells tables as Excel files, and I've posted those to srsw.org under the data tab. Next steps for me will be to, of course, begin updating the Google Earth mashups with that new data. Currently, the data that's in the mashups is from 2021. Yesterday, Gelman's, excuse me, January 2023 data came in, and there were 2 wells with their highest ever reading. MW1, just bring up this image here. So this is on the northern edge of the plume, and added in these 2 new years here. 2022 was 140, and the new one as of this month was 150 parts per billion. So this is clearly going up here. The thing that's strange about this, I don't have time to talk about right now, is that Gelman classifies this as an E unit, a deep E unit. But if you look at the elevation of it, it matches the elevation of the wells at Evergreen in the D2 unit. So we're talking about a well here. Gelman is claiming that that shallow is somehow able to turn the corner and rise north instead of just coming straight east from Evergreen. So that's something we can go into more discussion of later. Let me go back to my chart here on the next page. EGLE's Gelman website, their documents list that's there, it turns out only has about 60% or 50% of the items that were on its previous documents list. And I understand that from talking to Dan Hamill earlier today that there's going to be some improvements to that document list. And that'll help, because one of the things that goes on is that a topic will come up and you want to go back and look at what happened in the past. And the data is not available. It's not readily available. It's in the repositories in paper form in the library and in a few of the other places, the city and the townships. But it's not all been scanned. It turns out I'm one of the repository locations that wasn't even listed, because citizens used to get all the repository materials too. And I still have the ones that were sent to me. And the ones that were sent to me, I had the Scioto Township scan those, all of the documents, for about 4 or 5 years. So there are scanned images of those. We just don't have them indexed the same way as what EGLE's records are. But with what I have, I can search for terms like in situ and bromate and come up with 60 or 70 different references, where if you look in the list, the old list or the new list, you only get, a handful of those. So that's a thing that's important for new people coming on board to understand what went on in the past. If they can't get to the information that was in the past, they don't have a good understanding to make decisions going forward. One simple change that the EGLE can make to their documents list, instead of asking for return 10, 25, 50, or 100 items at a time, just ask to return all items. Because I had a hell of a time downloading the documents list. I had to do it in sections, 100 at a time, and then put it together. Where if they had an option, a simple option to say 10,000 or all records, I could have done it in one download. And of course, I think this is going to happen. They're going to put the items in date order, year, month, day order, not just year order, which is more like the original. So that'll help going forward with documenting what's going on. Okay, now I'm going to jump over to the SIO sampling and show you on Google Earth what has happened at SIO over the last couple of years. So here's the map of the sampling, the 4 rounds of sampling that SIO Township had done. And then I've taken those and I've plotted it on Google Earth. Here's where the doxing was found. Here's where it wasn't found. I'll throw in here, the Blueberry Lane and Ann Arbor Township, just to give you context there. That's the one that Mike was talking about being resampled. I'll even throw in MW 148, which Dan Hamill was talking about earlier. It's got 1.1 part per billion. So here's a possible pathway from these high concentrations at Evergreen at a certain level all the way up through where these concentrations were found. There's some anomalies off to the side and over here that don't follow this path. This is a possible pathway. Then I did the next thing is I repeated these locations. And then I repeated the arrow, but I did it bringing them up above the surface so you can see the screened elevation of these hits. So what you can do here is kind of travel through the groundwater layers to see how it could hit some of these wells at certain elevations and not others. This is a little kludgy because I'm doing it in Google Earth, which is not really set up to do 3D animation like this, but I'm trying to use it as a tool. I think if I double click this, that'll give me the view I want. There we go. So you can see these yellow hits all tend to be in the same elevation, where some of the non-hits were shallower or off to the side. So that gives you a little impression of what it's like to go through the aquifer layers. And this is probably dioxane going through those aquifer layers. Now I'm going to pan back, take away the vertical, and show you where the samples were for 2000 through 2022 by Scioto Township. And I'm going to go back to repeat what I showed earlier with Dan Hamill's update. Here's where they're going to be sampling in 2023 in Scioto Township. Now there's some criteria that the state has used to say it's within 500 or 1,000 feet of hits. So let's go out to a 500-foot approximate limit here. And if you zoom in, well, that criteria really doesn't apply to this well, because there's some homes here that should be sampled, and EGLE knows that they didn't want to add these at this point. Also, similarly, there's one here, a couple homes here that probably should be sampled. And then if you go down to the farther down, closer to the contamination, there's even one of these hits that probably should include some other sampling. So we talked about that in our earlier meeting I had with Dan Hamill and a practice run we had earlier today. But just so everybody knows, it's not all of the wells within 500 or 1,000 feet. It's the ones that were chosen, which is good. What's not good is that it's not going to use the 522 method. So some of these hits were below 0.5. So EGLE probably won't be able to detect those. We won't know if the dioxane is still there. Where if they used the 522 method, we would have better tracking of the contamination over time. So I hope that decision changes by the time they get around to doing the sampling. I got one more page to do here. So I covered all of this. Well, this is just a quick thing that part of the problem I had with mapping all this stuff, because the different agencies keep track of address information in different formats. They do not have standard address. They don't use standardized addresses. So you can't just look up such and such Wagner, because it might be North Wagner. So there's some work to be done by all the agencies to standardize their street addresses, so it's easier for anybody, any analysis, any researchers to associate the data, correctly link the data. And the last thing is just this ongoing thing that we need to review all of our information infrastructure and how to keep this up over time for long-term contaminants like dioxane and PFAS. We've seen data loss in the few years that, in the 30 years I've been involved. And over the life of the cleanup, we should not have any data loss. So that's all I have. Let me go back to the agenda. First of all, any questions? Did I get done in time?
With plenty of time, yes.
Again, those all that information is linked in the update. It'll be in the minutes, and it's even on the agenda. So if somebody wants to go back and review it, they can open those up themselves and contact me if you have any questions. There is one thing here that is on the agenda here that do we cancel or reschedule July 4th, 2023? I don't know that we have to make that decision now, but I want people to think about it.
Good point.
Okay, that's all I have.
So does anyone have any non-agenda items that they'd like to raise at this point?
Mike's got one.
I do, Jack. I just wanted to report that in Ann Arbor Township, so the Board of Trustees has approved a request for proposal. Working with Dan Bicknell, we've come up with about 24 residences in the area around Blueberry Lane that the township wants to test and see what we find there. And so we are processing that. The board approved the submission of the request for proposal, so we'll keep the CARD group advised of when those tests will be accomplished.
Mike, if you could please send me a table, the data in table format with the XY and any other information, any well information you have. I can always go and do that myself, but if you've already looked up the well depths and things like that, that saves me a lot of time in creating these Google Earth layers.
So Mike, when you do that, are you gonna do split sample and reserve a split for say, for example, EGLE to test should you get a positive result?
You know, we didn't talk about that. And being a lawyer, not a scientist, I don't even know the parameters of how long. I know that there are time limits on testing and the like, holdover time. So anybody wants to contact me to help us through that as to whether this is something we ought to do and would be valuable for us to do it, I'd be glad to hear it.
Right. Any other non-agenda items? We have our meeting reminders there, and if there's no opposition, I'm going to end this meeting.
Thank you.
Hey, Roger, glad to see you up and around. Thanks for all your work on this, even though you're sick.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Dr. Facilius.